Welcome to Conversations. I am Uzoamaka J. Oftentimes, people feel tired of holding conversations on the ills of the society, especially Nigerian society, and the neglect of governance by the governing elites. But we have to keep holding conversation because to change a society is depending on how open the society is in holding conversations and in holding talks. So today, to debut this program, I have come to the school, the institution that molded me as a journalist, the International Institute of Journalism. And with me here is Dr. Emman Usman Shehu, who was my tutor. He's also the director of this institute, International Institute of Journalism. But he's not only a tutor, he's also a poet. He's also an author of many books. And he's also a journalist. And with that, he also has a special interest in molding and lifting people. And that's why I am honored to begin this program with him and in this school. Thank you, sir. It's my honor to start this program with you, sir, and in this school.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzoamaka. I feel highly honored to be the person you are debuting your program with.
Thank you, sir. And let's start with the first question. As the tutor of molding journalists and the director of this institute, what is your greatest joy in tutoring the next generation of journalists? And do you think their future is guaranteed in this career?
Naturally, I like sharing knowledge. I've always been passionate about sharing what I know, what I learn with other people. So definitely I'm always excited when I see people who have gone through my tutelage fulfilling their potential. So yes, especially in the context of journalism, it's always encouraging to see products of the Institute spreading their wings and flying as far as they can go, with the knowledge that they have acquired here. And I think they have a future because in spite of the challenges that we have in the country, the challenges are not local, they are also global challenges. But the world goes on, life goes on, and part of the challenge of life is to be able to find your way through that challenge. So yes, there will be opportunities which they can exploit to advance or make a mark in their profession.
Could you share more on the opportunities that upcoming journalists may like to explore?
Yeah, the opportunities are numerous. For instance, the opportunities that come from self-development. Today, the internet, being in the digital age, there are so many opportunities in the context of self-development. So many things that you can learn online to develop yourself. But not only that, even online, you also have accessories that you can acquire, in terms of software that you can use in your everyday job. Even a basic thing like editing, whether editing for video or editing for audio, or even the typical editing we do as editors. There are so many softwares that are available in this context. And of course, because of the capacity that is available in the digital age, people can become independent producers. They can become content creators. They can set up their own platforms as investigative journalists. They can set up their own platforms as creators of all kinds of content. So technology has made it possible for these opportunities to exist. Of course, beyond the technology itself, there are traditional training opportunities that also exist that they can key into by looking out for all these various trainings or workshops or whatever that are available, either online or even courses they can apply and attend. Then they can also get funding, look for funding that is available in one capacity or the other that they can key into for their projects. And then, of course, networking. The digital age has made networking possible. So the opportunities are there.
Thank you so much, sir. Let's continue and move forward to other questions that is now bordering on Nigeria. As the saying goes, pens are mightier than swords. In the last 65 years of Nigeria's existence, pre and post-independence, let's take it beyond the independence. What impact do you think that Nigerian journalists have made towards Nigeria's development, and have they made impact, and to what extent do you think that impact has contributed to the development of Nigeria?
I'm happy you've broken the question yourself into segments, so that makes answering it easy for me. Let me just summarize by saying there is no doubt that journalists have made a huge impact in this country, and they have contributed immensely to national development, despite the seeming setbacks that we have, despite the seeming difficulties, despite the gloom that hangs around. But imagine if journalists had not played their role, things would have been worse than what they are now. So pre-independence, of course, we all know that journalists or journalism itself facilitated getting independence. Although relatively, we seem to have gotten independence on a platter of gold, because if you compare the independence struggles in other African countries, from Algeria to South Africa, you'll see that ours was relatively easy. But nonetheless, there were difficulties, and the fact that there was a journalistic advocacy which birthed our media in Nigeria, a media of an adversarial media, which has been the attitude of the Nigerian press, and that has given it even a global stature. There is no way you talk about the media in the world that you do not talk about the Nigerian media in the context of its vibrancy, of its advocacy. Post-independence, we have been able to sustain, the media has been able to sustain our independence. Remember, we went through a civil war, we came out of the civil war, we got military rule, we had to go from military rule to transition to democracy. And in all of those facets, the press was not found wanting. I mean, not that it didn't have its flaws, but the press was able to sustain a certain level of contribution that enabled us especially to overcome the military interregnum in the country. And we've come into the post-military era, and the press is still here for us, because despite the shenanigans of the political class, it is the press that is enabling us, the journalists are the ones enabling us to voice out our discontent, our grievances, despite the manipulations of the political class and their collaborators. So, no doubt, the press has its shortcomings. We cannot run away from the fact that one of the major shortcomings is that there's a lot of quackery, a lot of quacks who are claiming to be journalists. Journalists who also, maybe because of the economic situation, are available for hire, as hatchet men. But generally, journalism and journalists are contributing towards national development. Just as we're talking, some people are applying the Freedom of Information Act to ensure that certain issues are not swept under the carpet. For instance, the case of the FCT minister, even our president himself, who does not want to surrender the details of some of his activities in the United States of America. And the media is there insisting that for the sake of transparency, that those documents must be unsealed, even though those documents are in America. But the press, a certain section of the press is insisting that it is not about politics, it's about transparency.
You made mention of military and civilian era, and I want you to say more on how journalists thrived in both eras.
Journalists generally thrived in both eras by thinking out of the box. During the military regime, it was obvious that the military was the antagonist, and therefore all the draconian measures, journalists had to find a way of overcoming this. In fact, that was what gave birth to guerrilla journalism in Nigeria, where people had to virtually become like guerrilla fighters, have offices somewhere other than their designated offices, print in secret, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, in some cases, they got arrested, and the classic case being in River State, where a journalist had his head shaved with broken bottle by the then River State military governor, which I think is symbolic of the kind of sufferings that journalists have endured in this country, especially under military rule. In the civilian rule, it's a bit more, it's not so obvious, because of course there are different interests, because there are different players, and sometimes that is manipulated, and you see that journalists don't seem to be united. But it hasn't stopped the same attempt at suppressing journalists, especially when journalists publish or have access to information that people in power feel is detrimental to their reputation. So we've had cases of media houses being stormed by the military. We've had cases of journalists being locked up. We've had cases of journalists being dismissed from their place of work, and so on and so forth. So that has continued. Also, with the security challenges, we've had journalists who have died in the course of duty, either because of the coverage of Boko Haram, or have been threatened directly by Boko Haram sending to them and warning them, and so on and so forth. So the nuances are different, but the issues are the same.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. But now many journalists are really suffering economically, and you made mention of quackery, which is also a part of it. But the economic suffering is really, it does impact their work, and especially in a society that don't actually cherish the suffering of the journalists and the risks they take in order to inform the society. So do you think that the risk is worth taking?
The risk is worth taking in the sense that if you are passionate about your job, you will recognize the risks, you will find ways to mitigate the risks. So the risks are there. There is no doubt that journalists in Nigeria are underpaid. Let's use the proper term. They are underpaid. A lot of media houses are being run on shoestring budgets, so to say, which is a very serious issue. And it is because most times the entrepreneurs who come into setting up media houses are really not interested in the sustainability of the media house. They are more interested in the power that comes with owning these media houses. So their focus is slightly different, and they don't see, they just see the journalists as tools. They don't see them as human resources. They just see them as machines that they can dispose of easily and whatever. So there's a need for a reorientation, for proper media management, and for, in that context, for the lives of journalists to be better taken care of by the people who hire or who take on their services. So that is very, 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 very important, because as long as there is as this issue of low payment, the temptation is always there for journalists to compromise the integrity of their profession.
And it also impacts the investigation that's supposed to be taking place.
Definitely it does, because you can just say, okay, kill that thing, or the editor will say, kill that story or whatever. In one of the classes, somebody was giving an example of how they had covered a story and done everything, and at the end, the story didn't come to light, because by the time they were ready to go, they got an order to kill the story. So yes, you are correct, and that is not professional. It's not professional at all. In fact, the mere fact that in this country we started selling news in a major government-owned organization, who were selling news, was one of the, for me, the betrayals of the ethics of journalism, because it's like cash and carry, and of course, where is the integrity in reporting the news?
In that case, Nigeria is not a free speech country.
Nigeria technically is a free speech country. We have the Freedom of Information Act. We have in the Constitution, freedom of speech is enshrined. But of course, as we know, in every country, you must also have the institutions that will ensure that these policies or these laws are strictly upheld. So the problem, of course, in the country is that some of these institutions are compromised by the people who are supposed to run the institutions.
So that means that it impacts the national development.
Of course it does. It does. And that is why I said we should have developed beyond where we are now. But imagine if the press even hasn't done anything. Our level of underdevelopment would have been worse than this.
So how will the press improve?
The press should improve by working together, by first of all, the ownership seeing that it has an important role to play in the development of the country, by putting aside political interests and looking at the role, the constitutionally enshrined role of the media, which is to be the organ that holds the leadership accountable and to help the society voice its grievances.
Thank you for that. Let's proceed. Now, many people have relaxed their concerns for Nigeria's development. What is really the reward of continued talking or sharing ideas and solutions towards solving Nigeria's myriad of problems? And we have the socio-political elite who behave as if they are deaf towards all these concerns. What do you think should be done?
What I think should be done, first of all, is for people, first of all, to have a mental reset. Even though generally morning and night comes to everybody physically at the same time, but mentally, our morning doesn't come at the same time. In other words, the awakening that we have as citizens usually don't come at the same time. And so that is one challenge. So we need, first of all, to encourage civic education. We have to encourage civic education so that our citizens are enlightened. Because when the citizens are enlightened and realize that actually power resides with them, power doesn't reside with the so-called rulers, that they are the ones who hold the ace, then we will have a paradigm shift from the situation where we are pauperized, we are made subservient by the ruling class, and therefore we feel we're in a state of helplessness. The country belongs to all of us as citizens, as much as it belongs to the people in the ruling class. By the political setup of the country, we are the ones who enthrone those people. We are the ones who make it possible for them to take up those various positions. So until we have a mental reawakening to realize that we are being manipulated, where our fault lines, ethnic, religious, social, whatever fault lines, are being deliberately manipulated by the ruling class, because it serves them better when they keep us divided than keeping us united. And of course, this is something they borrowed from the colonialists. This is what the colonialists fostered on us and gave us the impression that we hate each other. We all want to dominate each other. The various ethnicities want to dominate each other. So once we started off from that mindset, the ruling class has only replaced what the colonial class was doing and has maintained that mindset. Meanwhile, when this ruling class meet in their boardrooms, they don't talk about these fault lines. They are more concerned about how they can rape the country in the various ways in which they can rape the country and enrich themselves, marry them, ensure that their families marry each other, and so on. Just recently, you saw the marriage that took place in Kaduna. A prominent politician from Zamfara, who was once a governor, with all the insurgency taking place in Zamfara, had the audacity to have a lavish a wedding attended by all the top class people, including the president in Kaduna, not many hours away from Zamfara. I mean, that is like rubbing it into the noses of Nigerians. So what can you people do? Because it's an insult. The political class has gotten so brazen that they don't even care about the optics. That, oh, this thing is not right. We shouldn't be doing this thing like this. Let us think of this. So hopefully such things will be the eye-opener for citizens to realize that this thing cannot continue like this. But also the way the economy is. The economy cannot continue to be sustained in this way. And sooner or later, people will realize that hunger does not have a tribe, poverty does not have a religion, disease does not have whatever it is that they use as one of our fault lines or whatever, that these things are fundamental issues of human existence. And Nigeria is a blessed country, whether we like it or not. There is no state in Nigeria that does not have nothing less than 10 mineral resources that the states can use in developing themselves. And that is why I disagree with this attitude of you are taxing people until they die. We do not need to use the same templates that the foreigners use, because their own setting is different from ours. In those overseas countries, and especially with the Bretton Woods and IMF, whatever, in those countries, they have safety nets for their citizens. We don't have any safety nets. The only safety nets we have are the resources that God has given us. And then you pull away, you remove subsidy, and impoverish the people in the name, and then tax them. You are taxing them for everything they do, and you do not have the ways in which you can stop the leakages, the theft of this. So you accumulate the money, and then there is no means of ensuring that that money is not stolen, which goes back to the whole argument about subsidy, money is being stolen or whatever. Why? You know the people who steal the money. Why don't you put in place guardrails to ensure that the monies are not stolen, and those that have been stolen, force those monies to be retrieved as much as you can get from the people. So for me, it is not, people have a right to be disillusioned, but their disillusionment should come from the realization that they themselves have contributed to it by allowing themselves to be manipulated by the ruling class. Once the citizenry of the country agree on one thing, and that is they are the ones who have the power, there will be a change. People will be very careful before they say they are going to represent the citizens or come to knock on their door for their votes. But most importantly, I think we should also change the way we get representation in this country. I do not think with the way that we are going that we can afford this kind of expensive form of governance. I think we should go back to when people who were either senators or parliamentarians generally were on part-time basis, because we cannot, politics has become a means of livelihood and it is being played in the wrong way, impoverishing the citizens, robbing the resources of the country, creating an elite class that does not care, has no compunction of compassion for the ordinary citizen. Sorry for my thesis.
so more work for the journalists.
Yeah, more work for the journalists, because it's journalists who have to enlighten the citizens. That is part of their responsibility.
But the citizens that do not even value the work of journalists.
Well, by and by they will realize the importance of journalists. By and by. That is part of why I said from the beginning. The morning, everybody's morning comes at a different time in terms of mental awareness. The morning comes at a different time. You think the citizens of Zamfara are happy to see what is happening, what has happened, that their former governor can lavishly organize a wedding like this while they are suffering? That is how awareness comes. And the press, is the responsibility of the press to point it out and say, this is not right. You know, this is not right.
So in that case, we continue the talk.
We continue the talk, and that is why talking is good, because if you don't talk,
keep holding the conversation.
If you don't talk, you will walk.
We will walk. so let's keep the conversation alive.
Yes.
If we don't hold conversations, that means we are ready for underdevelopment and war, as Doc said. So let me go into you as a poet. Yeah. Just a point. You know, historically, poets held impact as preservers of historical records through their words. But do you think that poets in Nigeria have done much in terms of still national development?
Oh yes, even if you look at the history of our literature and look at even just the various generations of poets, not to talk of writers in general, it's almost a reflection of the journalism of the country. The Osadebes, the Azikiwes, all those early poets, that is poets who are writing in English. We're not talking now of the traditional poets, but poets who are writing in English. We're concerned about the country, the nation, the emergence of the country, their country, the place they belong to. And those who followed in their footsteps were even more focused stylistically and thematically about the issues of the country. That has, in fact, they were seen as poets who were as angry poets. They were angry about the disillusionment that had come with independence. Just like all the other writers in the various genres reflected that disillusionment. But, you know, sadly, we seem to have come into a period where there's more concern now about flowery language in poetry, difficult syntax in poetry, and you do not see the societal relevance of some of the some of the poems that are being produced. People seem to be more concerned about writing to win prizes, and the judges are more concerned of don't know how to put it in a nice way, of, of a certain kingship, of awarding the prizes in the context of a certain kingship that does not sustain the original ethos of the country's poetic culture.
Well, do they have to do more?
They have to do more. They have to do more. We have to look at the social relevance of what we write, because, like you said, the poets have a responsibility. In fact, traditionally, poets were revered in society because they were like the conscience of the nation, the conscience of their countries. In Arab culture, for instance, any household that had a poet was regarded as a special family, that they had a poet in their family. And when you look at the Bible, some of the most beautiful parts of the Bible are the ones that are written in poetry form. I don't need to go into deeper details. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there is a relevance that poetry has to society beyond just the fancy, flowery language and abstraction, just to win prizes or that. And I think those who continue in this direction, in the fullness of time, they will be recognized as the people who have truly protected the integrity of the society, who have reflected the issues of the society. Because every poem that has a social relevance becomes like a historical document. People will go back and say, oh, this was the poem that was written at so and so time. This was the issue. And when they interrogate those poems properly, proper literary criticism, not the fancy literary criticism that exists now, proper, serious literary criticism, we will see that there's a place for poets who are spokesmen of the society.
Thank you so much for joining this program. So in that case, we keep talking, we keep holding conversations, and as the program suggests, conversations, we keep on holding conversations through which the society can have a rebirth, through which the people can have a resurgence in their understanding of what needs to be done, and that they should not be manipulated by the political elite, like Dr. Emman said. So, thank you, Doctor, for being on the program.
Thank you so much for enabling us have this conversation. We have to keep talking.
And we hope that another time we call on you, you will answer.
Definitely.
Thank you, sir. My name is Uzoamaka J. Let's keep this ongoing in another episode. Thank you.